Message is being broadcast by the Department of Defense of the Republic. At 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, multiple unidentified objects were confirmed to have entered Earth's atmosphere.
Discovery Houston, 20 seconds to LOS Druidry. Contact, nice to be in orbit.
The first message that comes to you is you are a divine being. You matter. You count. You come from realms of unimaginable power and light, and you will return to those realms.
The vast stretches of the unknown and the unanswered and the unfinished still far outstrip our collective comprehension.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Broadcasting from Forest Tower Studios, all the way from the Deep South. Now, here is your host, Joe Root.
All broadcasting from New York, upstate near the Great Lakes. Sorry, it's Lighting the Void. I'm your host, Joe Root. You know, I've been trying to get this microphone right since we had our manic breakdown last time. Yeah, this is Lighting the Void. We are a live show here on KTLK Digital Broadcasting, the Fringe FM. Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. Tonight, we're going to delve into a pretty deep subject. We're going to get into psychedelics and the occult and the interrelation between those two subjects. I think that it's something that we've talked about frequently on the show, but it really matters how deep this rabbit hole goes. And Julian Vayne will be joining us here momentarily to discuss this. Also want to thank all our patrons for supporting the show. If you want to support the show, go to lightingthevoid.com and click on the Patreon banner. We're trying to change the website a little bit at Lighting the Void. So I don't know if you guys have noticed, it's got kind of a little bit more of a modern feel to it. But, I've been adjusting this microphone ever since that happened, or whatever happened that day. And you'll have to just bear with me until I get the sound back here. But I think it's starting to sound a little better for the most part. Yeah, and if you want to support the show, like I said, you can go to the Patreon. You can click on the donate banner and donate as well. If you want to call in tonight, that call-in number is 1-800-588-0335. I can tell you that a lot of us have been going through a lot of crazy change. And that change is causing us to make big decisions, right? So we got to make like big decisions in our life. And if you haven't noticed, some people are leaving the network, and we got new people coming onto the network, and man, it's all for the best, though. I promise you. Everything in life, I guess the only certainty in life is change, and I know it gets a little scary sometimes, but we have to go through with it. I think when our soul is calling us to either do something or cut something out or whatever, we got to go through with it, and that's what I've been going through. Like this weekend, I mean, I got to tell you, it's been a crazy weekend for me. I've been going through like this purge, like enough change is going on in my life that it made my stomach kind of twist a little bit. But if you get down into meditation, if you can go into the internal realms, I think that helps. I think it helps when we do that. And I don't want to get into a deep philosophical discussion about change with you. I just want to tell you kind of the stuff I've been going through, like since that past life regression. Man, all kinds of crazy stuff has been happening, like internally, and I think it's for the best. So, I wanted to get into some deep questions here because we've addressed them on this show about occultism, which, if you know the word occult, just simply means hidden, right? And that's part of the Voidwalker motto and creed is to explore consciousness, to find out what's hidden, to get to the truth of the matter, to try to know what most say that we can't know. And what role, I wonder, sometimes do psychedelics play in this realm of trying to find out what's hidden? Because the one thing I can tell you that's common for sure when it comes to psychedelics is a lot of times people that go through these things, you notice a common pattern is they have a hard time explaining what they've experienced. They'll try to explain it through words, then they'll try to explain it through feeling. Well, it's like a feeling, or it's a word, or it's a geometrical shape. And you notice if you just sit back and pay attention, they can't quite put it all together, but they know they've experienced something vast, something that was more real. You hear this term a lot. More real than real, more vivid than what I see now. So when we look into the mind, really like, what are the gateways into the mind, if we think about it in that sense? Because all we see is what's in front of us, right? And if you look at the double slit experiment, it's something that's profound, right? It's always telling us that we're co-creating while we're observing all the time, co-creating and observing instantaneously all the time. And then we say, well, we're living in a simulation where we're living in an illusion. But how can it be an illusion if we're co-creating with it, if the double slit experiment is right? Well, I think that that psychedelics kind of show us, or give us a peek into the construct. And the occult and the practices that come with the occult kind of let us know that there's a program behind this that has everything to do with my mind, my subconscious, even sometimes having to trick our subconscious. And the more I study the tarot, the more I study the occult, and the more I look at this structure of initiation it's gone back. It doesn't just go back to the Golden Dawn. It goes way back to the beginning of time when shamanism first came about, when people just had this awareness, right? That maybe the occult is all about getting to this point to where we have to trick our minds back into seeing what nature really is. Like if you think about it, right? If you think about the tarot, the 4 elements and all the stuff that they go through, it's just a long process to show you that you're a magician, that you can create everything that your mind believes. And everything that your mind believes creates your reality, and that perpetuates, and it can do it in an instant or it can do it over time through programming. So really, are we just deprogramming our mind so that we can start over and become the magician? Or are we kind of doing both? I get really complexed. Actually, the word would be perplexed thinking about it. But I will say this, that I do really feel like that our reality is constantly speaking with us. That everything that we experience and everything that we see is in some form a way of creating and observing our own creations. That something's talking to us all the time. When you have a synchronicity, that's what that's about, right? A recognition that something's speaking to you, or that you're speaking to yourself. Deja vu even sometimes. Or omens or totems. When you see animals, certain things that always show up. Or when you do divination yourself, when you ask a question to the universe or God or your higher self or your holy guardian angel or whatever it is that you call it. And, you go to the tarot deck, or you can even do TV mancy, like Lon Malo Duquette says, where he'll simply just turn on the TV and flip a bunch of channels and then let the TV give him the answer. It sounds preposterous, doesn't it? But I think sometimes the language that our reality is speaking to us, it's like we can ask reality a question, and 9 times out of 10, it's right there in front of us. And the only time that we realize that there's this greater mind trying to speak to all of us is when we have an enlightening experience, or when we have a psychedelic experience. Have you ever noticed when you talk to people that have never had a psychedelic experience versus talking to someone that has? There's a vast difference there, isn't there? It's not like you're talking to two different people or you're talking to like one person's stupid and one's not. This person could be very intelligent, but because they haven't had a psychedelic experience, person B that has might not have an IQ of 140, but they can understand and feel and see things and even predict things that person A cannot. I think if we really knew that there was this like greater mind that we could all tap into, which is a old like hermetic thing that I believe in, that all is mind, right? If we knew we could, what would you do? Not just dream about it, not say, oh, you know, that's a fantasy, right? I mean, that's good to think about. But if you actually knew that you're connected to a superconscious that responds to you, it co-creates with you every second. It does it instantaneously, and it does it ahead of time too. Everything that you ask it, tell it, believe, it just reflects that back to you. And if you could see the construct behind it, the geometry of it, the beauty of it, what would you do different? Would you still be a victim to all of your ailments and all of the things that you feel victimized about? Or would you cringe in anxiety when you realize that you're responsible for everything in your life? Everything. I don't know. I think we get to those moments where we feel like, oh man, I'm responsible for everything in my life. Like I must be a terrible person or something, like if my life is this way, or I must be a negative person. But you know, people that constantly experience the psychedelic states, you don't really. I don't even think they talk like that. You guys remember, like when Dick Kahn came on here, this guy wrote about all of his DMT experiences that he had. He wasn't really concerned about the past or the future or how bad of a person he was or how crazy people thought he was. He was just trying to find the truth, and he felt like he was getting closer to it. But I do think we can get obsessed a little bit about that sometimes, and we forget to live in the world that we're in. So when we talk about magic and the occult, why are we doing these things? Are we doing it for practical reasons? And then if we are, we're made to feel guilty about that. Like, you know, I want good health, I want wealth, I want love in my life. Well, if you do magic to do those things, then you're just bad. Well, I don't know. I mean, you might spend 10 to 15 years of your life going to school, doing all this other stuff because you want health and wealth and everything. But given a shortcut, I'm sure everybody would take it. They just don't believe that most people don't believe they can have it. I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, I'm not going to say that I believe I can have it. I doubt all of it. And when I did that past life regression, I doubted that. Like, I thought, man, am I just making this up in my head, or what's going on here? But then I had to go back and meditate and remember the times that I thought that I felt launched, like when I was in the pyramid, or when those pictures came to me. That's why it was so hard to, was so hard to articulate, because I was in this state of confusion of, I'm trying to talk about what I see, but I want to make sure that my mind isn't making this up. So I had to keep bringing myself back down into this place. And Daniel said that gets easier with time, and I know a lot of people after they heard that are going to think that I'm a complete nutcase. Some people that had faith in me, or whatever you want to call it. But I really got to tell you, at my deepest spot in my heart and in my soul, I'm a void walker, man. I want to know the truth. And I'll do it. I'll do whatever it takes to get it. I know that sounds a little nutty. I also want to say, too, before I get going down this road too much, the people that bought tickets to the Fringe FM, you're going to get your video. Trust me. We're just editing it as we go along. We're not going to be sending out DVDs. I know David asked me about that. But we're going to send you a link to the video once it's all edited. So there was a lot of stuff that had to be fixed. We're still working on that. Just be patient. I know when I went to the Ozark conference, I didn't get mine for like 3 months after the conference. So I'm not going to make you wait that long, but we're still working on it. But I do need you guys' feedback. Like, here's the thing. Even if you're a patron or if you're not, you can always contact the show. You can email us at contact@lightingthevoid and give us your feedback. I get long emails from a lot of people, and I really appreciate those because I can get into them and really like look at what, you know, you guys are interested in, what you like, what you don't like. And, but I promise you this, if it's something that I like and that I want to do and it lines up with what you like and you want to do, we'll do it. But if you want me to do 9 shows on Bigfoot, I'm probably not going to do it. It's not that I don't think Bigfoot isn't interesting. It's just not the direction that this show is going to go. Or even UFOs for that matter. I think we've beat that subject into the ground, although I will talk about them. I think it's very interesting. But the main part of this broadcast is going to be about things like conscious exploration, astral travel, the occult, psychedelics, magic. We'll throw a little cryptids and stuff in there too. I'm not afraid of that. And a lot of people ask me, well, how long have you been doing the occult or practicing magic? And at some point I realized I've been doing it my whole life. And I know it's a cliche saying, good God, but I've said it and I mean it. We all practice magic, right? Every one of us. But there are few practicing magicians out there. There are more now than there used to be, I think. This is going to be a really interesting show because the author Julian Vayne is going to be with us here momentarily. And he's got a book called Getting Higher, the Manual of Psychedelic Ceremony. Also, Magic Works, Stories of Occultism in Theory and Practice. And anybody that's got a website called the Blog of Baphomet is going to get my attention right off the bat. So, because most people look at the, you know, the emblem of Baphomet and they say, oh, it's the devil or whatever. And they put Baphomet even into, what was that show, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, where they make Baphomet look like it didn't even look when Eliphas Levi showed it, right? What it really represented. And there's still some stipulation as to back and forth what it really represents, but if you go to the website, theblogofbaphomet.com, and he puts right in here in the start of this, which I think is really cool, it says, what is the blog of Baphomet? We are magicians who want to create a space to describe our living experience of magic in a way that is informed by many traditions, but strives not to be limited to any one style of occultism. Like Baphomet, our representation of the underlying structure of the universe we seek to dissolve and recombine. This work will be personal, at times like reading someone's magical diary, and global, exploring the magical worldview as it touches on fields such as technology, politics, and social process. And we will aim to include as many readers as possible, but without dumbing down and rehashing stuff. We hope to stimulate discussion and will value your comments. Now, who doesn't want to read that blog forever, right? I know I do. I'm going to drop this in the chat too. If you want to join our chat room, you can go to thefringe.fm/chat room. But mainly, I just want to say for those of you too, after I did the regression, we salvaged the audio there. those of you that still kind of like gave me the old pat on the back and made me feel better about myself, thank you. Because I usually honestly don't really care about what everybody thinks, but for some reason that I was in a super vulnerable state there. Like I really worried about it. I'm not going to lie to you. And after I did that, that was like the precipice, like the point, an event where all kinds of stuff started changing for me. I guess I can say that I've been thinking a lot about Lighting the Void and like, is it going to go to another 600 and something episodes? I think it should. But in what way? I mean, we're going to find out. And so we're going to talk a little bit this week about, this is a best way to start this week off, by the way. As we go into the Thanksgiving, and tomorrow night, we're going to have Dr. Bruce Goldberg on. We're going to talk about future life regression and time travel. And then we're going to have part 2 of Russell Brenniger, that show that got cut off that night. It was insane. It's going to be a cool week. I want you guys to stick around because I got a good feeling that we're going to have a good conversation with Julian Vayne, who's coming at us all the way from the UK. It's going to be an interesting show. If you guys got any questions, please contact the show at contact@lightingthevoid.com. You can call in again when we open the phone lines up at 1-800-588-0335. You can text the show at 501-777-5631. And don't forget to join that chat room. We'll be right back.
Are UFOs real? Are aliens visiting Earth? Are governments around the world hiding the biggest secret in history? We're UFO Seekers, official partner of the Fringe FM, and we're on a hunt for the truth. Join us as we investigate locations like Area 51 by subscribing on YouTube at youtube.com/UFO Seekers.
Telepath is a weekly digital newsletter filled with the latest paranormal news, trending topics, and fresh articles from some of the most popular critical thinkers in the community today. Stay informed on your favorite paranormal podcasts and live streaming talk shows. Interact with the Telepath and upload your paranormal story or pics. It could be featured in an upcoming edition. Sign up right now for the free Telepath newsletter at paranormal.radio. That's
This is Dave and Dave from Surviving the System, and you're listening to the Fringe FM. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, the best revenge is success.
Stardate November 5th. Few objects in the universe are more beautiful than the final breath of a sun-like star. The star expels its outer layers, forming a colorful cloud that's lit up by the star's hot core. The cloud can be sculpted into amazing shapes, from a butterfly to the heart of an atom.
You're listening to KTLK Digital Broadcasting, the Fringe FM.
This is KTLK Digital Broadcasting, the Fringe FM.
Astral travel, magic, mysticism, and manifestation. What used to be heresy should be understood as our birthright. These are some of the topics we discuss on Lighting the Void, where we take you deep into the unknown. There are guest interviews, live on-screen calls, and me, Joe Root. Come join our family of explorers of consciousness, weeknights at 9 p.m. Pacific time to 11, right here on KTLK Digital Broadcasting, the Fringe FM. Have you ever wanted to dream about being a character in your favorite video game or movie? Would you like to dream your fantasy with all 5 senses in detail and remember everything? It's time to bring the dreaming mind back online. Introducing Dreaming for Gamers from Ian Wilson.
Dreaming for Gamers will teach you how to program your dreams to dream what you want from any video game, movie, or source material that you choose. The courses help rehabilitate the dreaming mind out of atrophy so you can remember your dreams, taste, touch, smell, see, and hear, as well as be self-aware and take complete control over the dream state like Neo in The Matrix. You can't catch COVID in a dream, but you can wake up with a happy ending.
Type in thefringe.fm/dreamplay and sign up today to get dreaming now. That's thefringe.fm/dreamplay, or click the banner at thefringe.fm today and take the 7-day dream challenge for free while it lasts. Hey, Fringe FM listeners. Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or no Wi-Fi available, you can still listen to every minute of the Fringe FM by calling 701-719-3971. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. Saves your data plan and no extra cost if you have unlimited minutes. Call 701-719-3971. That's 701-719-3971. Listen to the Fringe FM on any phone, anytime, anywhere. To Lighting the Void. Our guest tonight with us is Julian Vayne. He's a British occultist with over 3 decades of experience of esoteric culture, from Druidry to Chaos Magick, from indigenous American shamanism through to Freemasonry and Wicca. And during this time, Julian has written for numerous underground esoteric journals, contributed to various collections of essays. He's led workshops, retreats, and facilitated a wide range of group ceremonies. Remember to go check out that website, the blog of Baphomet.com. Thanks, Julian, for coming on the program, man.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Joe. It's really, really appreciated. Lovely to be here.
I know it's early in the morning over there. I always have to say this to anybody that joins us from across the pond. Thank you, really, seriously, for getting up and spending time with us here. It's really cool, you know.
You're very welcome. It's great to have the invitation.
So I guess, you know, going on with my rant, first I want to get into your books just really quick. Getting Higher, the Manual of Psychedelic Ceremony. Did you write this book? Because I haven't read it, but did you write this book on how to perform ceremonies in the psychedelic state, or was it a lot more than that?
So for Getting Higher, what I wanted to produce is a book that I would have found helpful maybe, 20 years ago, more, something like this. I wanted to produce something which was a very accessible, relatively short and sweet publication, which could be used by people who want to explore psychedelic substances in a way that's safe, sane, consensual, and also would like to get more bang for their buck. They would like to build those experiences into what I describe as a ceremony, because my background is as an occultist and ceremonial practitioner, to really engage with the psychedelic experience so that those people can be really enriched by the opportunity to work with these remarkable sacraments, these remarkable medicines. So it was a book that was really designed to be very, very accessible to people. It deliberately uses, sometimes it refers to the person taking the drug as the psychonaut, sometimes as the shaman, sometimes it refers to them as sacred medicines, sometimes it refers to them as drugs, because I want it to be really accessible to a really wide audience. Lots of people have got access to these substances. Not always do those people have good advice or a lineage or people to help them out. And I just hope that the book could help them out.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of people are afraid of, even including myself. I get a little curious about, I've done acid and mushrooms in my younger days, but I never, I've always wanted to do DMT, but I think people talk about it as it's so sacred. I really want to make sure, and I think a lot of us do, we want to make sure our first experience is something special, you know. At least I can speak for myself, and maybe this book could help us do that, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I really hear that. I think that that's a really laudable kind of aim, a good desire to have those experiences in a really good, safe and profound way. I would say that human beings are naturally ritualizing creatures. So we do this all the time. You know, pre-pandemic times, we would shake hands when we meet each other. We lay plant sex organs, that is flowers, on the graves of our dead. So we're naturally ritualizing creatures. So I think you can give people just like a few hints and a few suggestions, which is what the book is about, and then say, okay, you want to take the medicine in a good way. So you have the medicine, you say a prayer or an intention over the medicine. You turn off the TV and the smartphone. You go to somewhere beautiful. You set up the right environment. Like, we can empower ourselves to do this. Otherwise, we're always chasing the exotic, or we're looking for the great shaman or the guru who's going to teach us. And I think today, one of the real challenges for our communities and our cultures is to become our own guru and our own kind of teacher, and to be able to assemble our knowledge actively and compassionately for ourselves and in community with the peer groups that we're with. So hopefully getting high is a way to encourage people to do that.
That's really cool, man. I can respect that too, because you I'm sure you've experienced it as well as a lot of other people have. When you start talking about profound things, it kind of brings energy around of people like, tell me more, right? Or I want to experience more. And you start getting this energy of like people want you to give that to them. And the whole time you're trying to tell them like, well, no, you can do this. You can do this. This is all you, right? Like, I get it. But tell me about your psychedelic experience. What was one of the first experiences you had that really changed your viewpoint on all of this, though?
Okay, so I guess I've always been interested in magic, and so particularly as someone who was fascinated as a very young man by the work of Aleister Crowley, I was fascinated in the relationship between drugs and psychoactive substances and magical practice. And Crowley kind of stands out as someone who people think is unusual. But in fact, if you look at the magical, the Western esoteric tradition and the magical and occult traditions generally, the use of substances to change awareness is really part of that process. Now, that said, when I first got involved in kind of group magical work, I found myself involved in Wicca. And Wicca, generally speaking, the experiences and the culture that I had, we used wine as the sacrament within the ritual, but nothing else, no other kind of substances. And then when I was about, I guess, in my early 20s, I had the opportunity, someone had gifted me some LSD, and I'd read about this, and I'd read Aldous Huxley, and I'd read all the stuff, and I was fascinated, and I thought, oh, I'll take this LSD, that'd be great. Everyone was away for the weekend. I had the house entirely to myself, my partner at the time, and the rest of the family were all kind of out. So I took the LSD. I took half of a square of blotter, and nothing happened. So I took the other half, and nothing happened. So I thought, oh, well, to hell with this. I'll take the other one. And then I realized that the way the blotter's design was that you only got the full design when you had 4 blotters together. So I had inadvertently taken 8 blotters of LSD. And I was very pleased that I'd spent the previous decade doing meditation, magical work, ritual work, and so on, because I was able to use those internal maps and that internal process to navigate through what retrospectively was quite a high dose of LSD that lasted for some considerable time. So that was my first one, a youthful misadventure, but one where fortunately the spirits of LSD were kind to me on that occasion.
Yeah.
You know, another good reason to get better information than perhaps I had when I realized that, oh, those little perforated lines, they must have been something about how many you're supposed to rip off, which I simply didn't understand at the time.
Yeah, well, yeah, that sounds cool, though. It could have been a lot worse, right? Definitely could have been a lot worse on you, you know?
Yeah. I mean, the thing for me was that this was in my early 20s, and I'd smoked weed and stuff, and kind of vaguely started getting into that. But I'd been much more interested in changing my awareness through things like meditation, ritual practice, path working, guided visualization, all of that kind of stuff. And it wasn't really until that moment that I realized that a lot of that skill and that practice that I'd done for you know, a considerable time, even at that sort of stage, because I got into magic very, very, very young. That those skills had really enabled me to navigate this state. And then I guess over the course of the next few decades, I became more interested in bringing together, or in some respects recovering, I suppose, my own spiritual tradition of the use of entheogens, the use of psychedelics and magic. And I was fortunate to come into contact with people from North and South America and from India and so on, to be able to work with those people, and with indigenous people here in northwestern Europe, working with different practitioners to really bring my own practice far more kind of closely into that field. So now that's something that I'm kind of I suppose closely identified with in lots of people's minds. But I started off essentially as a magical practitioner and got into psychedelics following my practice of magic.
Cool, that's really cool. So. When you started off your everybody wants to know this. I know I do. When you started off doing your magical practice, there's always something in that practice that I think gets us, I think something that makes us say, oh, that this is real. I don't know why you started it, but I started it because I had doubts and I was curious about that if it was real at all. But certain profound things start happening in magic where you're like, oh, did this really manifest this way, or did this happen this way, until enough of them happen and you're like, well, I can't really prove it scientifically. I just know that this is happening. That's what kind of happened for me. But I am kind of curious about how your experience went with magic, because how you started realizing that it was a real thing.
I guess in some ways, it wasn't so much a sense of realizing it was real. It was more having an intuition that this was the thing that I was passionately fascinated with. And so there were various kind of important staging points, because I don't remember a time when I wasn't interested in it. So I started reading, going to my local library and encountering the work of various people. There's a British witch who migrated to North America called Sybil Leek. There were things like the work of Aleister Crowley, the work of Israel Regardie. This is in a kind of a little provincial library. But I started encountering these texts when I was maybe literally like 9 or 10 years of age. I was absolutely fascinated by this stuff. So I started doing experiments like you would, because I kind of figured that magic is a thing you can read about and that's cool. But fundamentally, it's about a praxis. It's about a doing of something. So I started doing the stuff out of the books. And I did various pieces of ritual. I remember doing like one piece of operative magic or spell casting, I suppose, which was to, my family were relatively poor. And so I did a spell to get my father's camper van sold so that we could basically have some like presents for Christmas.
Yeah, right.
And
cool.
Like as at the moment I'd finished the spell, I went downstairs to go and hang out with my family, and my dad got a call of someone who wanted to buy his vehicle and wanted to buy it at exactly the asking price. Didn't want to negotiate, just wanted it like immediately there, came round the next day and did it. So I kind of thought, okay, well, there's no way for me to empirically test this. This is not amenable to scientific inquiry in the conventional sense of the term. I can't rerun the experiment where I don't do the ritual and see what happens. But gradually over time, like Aleister Crowley says in Magic and Theory and Practice, by doing certain things, certain results seem to follow. So that's what I noticed. And I noticed that this was both internal results, like weird mystical experiences, and also noticing things in the world, apparently having some capacity to change things in the world, but also simultaneously, and really thinking about what you were saying earlier on before I came on, as well as creating things in the world, recognizing how I am created by things in the world. Yeah, kind of like the way divination works, like listening to things, as well as being like the creative, magician in the circle, bellowing at stuff and getting stuff to hopefully to happen.
Right.
So a lot of those were kind of like staging points of experiment for me. And as a kid, what I did was I went through all the books I could conceivably find, and I started writing down all the spells, all the different things that would that allegedly from all kinds of eras and time periods would do various things. And as I assembled this collection of material, it started to dawn on me that what I was looking at was not something that was to be understood purely literally. It needed to be understood in a kind of symbolic or a slightly different kind of register. So I guess a bit like that thing of whether or not we look at, say, Genesis in the Bible, and we decide on whether or not the days of the week or the periods of days in which the world was created were literally 24-hour days, or whether or not that's a symbolic expression, meaning a series of unfolding aeons or whatever. So I started realizing that magic was true and magic was real, but that magic also was this thing which is a kind of a slippery, indeterminate substance, if you like, or experience that slips between reality and delusion, that slips between the fact that we can't empirically test these things. We can only talk about there being activities and apparently linked results to that sort of stuff. And that a lot of what magic is about for me, and the way I understand it now, is it's the technology of the imagination. That's basically what it boils down to. Yeah, so the simple example I give as a go-to example, just briefly, is that what you do is you can use your skill, like a magical skill, like a repertoire of something you've learnt, to imagine various things. So when you're going into a job interview, you can use a skill standing with your legs a little bit apart, your hands on your hips, and doing some deep breathing and imagining yourself as this successful and empowered and confident individual.
Yeah.
So then you go into the job interview, you are much more likely to be successful. So at simplest level, magic looks very much like psychology, and a lot of psychology is the daughter science of magic, in the same way that chemistry is the daughter science of alchemy. Yeah, so these are kind of imaginal effects were things that I started playing with, really quite young.
That's really cool, though. I mean, the fact that you got experimental with it is probably why you're so into it now, because I think that's the perfect attitude to have with it, is experimental. Because so many people they're looking for a formula. I know I did when I first started. I was looking for a school or a formula, or kind of like this system where I could kind of go up in grade and all that stuff. But I think we miss so much when we do that too, because we don't take the time to back up and experiment with all of the concepts and the fundamentals of it sometimes, and just study more and learn more. And expand on it, like even what Crowley would say, we don't challenge the status quo. That's what he had to say to the Golden Dawn. You guys are coming up with a system where nothing gets challenged too much. It's not good to do that, but that childlike experimental nature or attitude, even the little things in life, I think is when you really start seeing just how big magic really is, or trying to figure out what it is. So, I know I was talking about that.
Can I just respond briefly to that one?
Sure,
there's a really, really important point there, which is totally right. Like a lot of this stuff, however, you can do it gently. It doesn't have to be like hardcore ritual or whatever, but whether it's even just like 20 minutes of mindfulness meditation, it's about practice. It's about gnosis. It's about first-person sovereign understanding of these experiences through going through your own process. And all this corpus of information, all this magical tech is all made up by people, or discovered by people, let's put it like that. And we're people too. And we have an absolute right, and it's probably important for ourselves and our psyche and our culture and our well-being to actually do this work, to do the practice. So totally, I hear it, and you're bang on right as far as I'm concerned, my friend.
Yeah, because it does show you what you're capable of. Like, okay, I'm co-creating with this all-mind reality, God, whatever you want to call it. I'm co-creating with it, but it's also allowing me to co-create in the way that's unique to me. Like, it's letting me be me too at the same time, So I'm curious as to what point in magic you spoke about it earlier, that you got into psychedelics. The reason for that, though, was it to just see? Did you do it for the experience, or is it because you wanted to see? Did you think that you were going to see something behind the construct, or did you just want the experience of it, man?
Okay, that's an interesting question, Joe. I mean, I would say that...
Or both, maybe,
I mean, if occultism is about discovering or exploring the mystery, so it's the study of that which is hidden. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about, hey, I'm just curious, that's an example of wanting to discover that which is hidden. And if I want to say, hey, I want to understand if there is an underlying structure to reality, that's a desire to understand that which is hidden. So I think that these things kind of very much go together, for many people. And certainly for me, I was interested in, I encountered LSD and I'd read like Aldous Huxley, Doors of Perception, Heaven and Hell, all that kind of stuff. And I was conscious that there were potentially locked into the chemistry of plants and fungi and their relationship with my neurochemistry, that there were these kind of keys that could unlock these novel experiences, and that there was a close link between the esoteric tradition and these things. I mean, Aleister Crowley did a lot of research and a lot of work with mescaline back in the early days of the 20th century. In the Golden Dawn were using mescaline, they were using cannabis, they were using a number of consciousness changing agents. Like when people look at the Golden Dawn rituals and you see all the colorful robes and so on, what you're really looking at is you're looking at like psychedelic ritual equipment. The first ever description of a mescaline trip, which was by a guy called Havelock Ellis. In his trip report, he writes about another person he gave the mescaline to. The person is W.B. Yeats, who was from the Golden Dawn.
Yeah.
Right. So for me, this whole material all came together. But I grew up in a culture, like I'm a white working class guy from the British Isles, right? So I grew up in a culture where all the people who used these substances were called shaman. They all had darker skin than me and they all lived in different countries, right? They weren't from my place. So my tradition, as I started understanding it or kind of re-engaging with it, led me to things like Wicca, led me to things like ceremonial magic and so on. Eventually, I started realizing that actually there's a strand through the whole Western ceremonial tradition of the use of psychedelic substances, particularly cannabis. But there were also all these people who were shaman who were in fact doing something very similar to what I was doing or trying to recover in my own kind of culture, trying to reimagine what the shamanism of Northwestern Europe would have been like, or, not in a kind of hyper indigenous way, but just for me now in the 21st century, So for me, these two things really, really sat well together, and the exploration was, like a lot of things in magic, it had multiple layers of meaning. It was both about curiosity, hey, what's out there? It was also about, are there these underlying structures of the universe that I can get access to? It was also about, maybe this will give me power in the sense that it will allow me to address some of my own suffering and difficulties and the things I see in the world that I might be able to then work with. It was all of the above. Yeah, that's kind of like the psychedelic experience. You could definitely say that. All of the above. All of the above, right? That's where it goes into, huh? And so you wrote a book called also Magic Works, Stories of Occultism and Theory and Practice. Now, what does this book go into? Does this book go into your experiences with just magic and that's it? Yeah, I guess. I mean, there's a set of, so far, like 3 volumes, which are all like essays that I've done kind of over time, collected into these 3 volumes. So there's Magic Works was the first of those. And so Magic Works is various essays, some of which were produced as academic papers for conferences. So there's one on the magic circle and the way that the magic circle is over time has changed its meaning from being, for example, in the grimoire tradition, it's a protective space that barricades the magician against the potentially malevolent demons that they're working with. So it's like a kind of medieval grimoire version of PPE, protective equipment against the spirit. Whereas when you get like later on to something like Wicca, the magic circle is seen more like a battery. It's like a zone in which energy is generated. So there's like kind of academic papers like that look at aspects of magical culture and like reflect on them. There's also my own personal kind of stories of doing various pieces of work. I do a lot of psychogeography work, so walking and exploring in the landscape, kind of tapping into the sacred landscape, which is very important for me. But there are also, in that particular one, there are some stuff on entheogens. I think that essay, there's an essay in there which is about the use of ketamine and some ritual technologies that me and a group of friends have been exploring with regard to that particular entheogen. So there's a whole bunch of stuff. It's a collection of essays, really. You've got Magic Works, then one called Deep Magic Begins Here, and another one called The Fool and the Mirror.
Well, then you've definitely have had an out-of-body experience for sure. With all of this stuff, man, I know you've had, like, even people to me that it's like, yeah, I did ketamine once and I was watching my body. Like, you had to have had an out-of-body experience during all of this for sure, right?
I mean, ketamine is a very fascinating substance. It's potentially used in the right context, and this is the caveat that we have to put in with all the psychedelic stuff, and in fact, most of the magical stuff, and to be honest, most of life, which is that if you do this well and in a way that is generous, compassionate, thoughtful, kind, and intelligent, then it's all good. So, if you take the example of ketamine. Ketamine is obviously, it's a remarkable anesthetic primarily, but it's a psychedelic anesthetic. It has the effect essentially of turning off the brain and then turning it back on. It's really helpful for people with trauma. It's incredibly useful for people with depression. It's a life-saving treatment for people who are in serious likelihood of killing themselves. It can interrupt suicidal ideation very successfully. It's being used brilliantly in North America now to do this. But what we did with a group of magicians I was working with was we were experimenting, like you say, with out-of-body experiences, but also kind of with in-body experiences. So we developed a technique where essentially what you do is you mummify the person who's taking the medicine. They're naked and they're wrapped up in what I think in America is called saran wrap, which is called cling film. Yeah. So you mummify the person, you dose them with ketamine, you lie them down, and then when they get to the point where they're just coming out of the K-hole, is you take a set of bandage removal scissors and you open them up. Whoa. And what you have is you have the experience of coming back from this out-of-body experience of dissolution into the universe and potentially being outside your body, doing all kinds of cool stuff in the psychedelic realm. But you come back into your body, and it's a bit like a kind of Reichian body armor kind of thing. Like we carry a lot of our tension, a lot of our difficulties, a lot of our trauma is encoded at a physical somatic level. It's in our muscles and our bones as well as in our brains, yeah? So we built this ritual to use this magical substance because we knew how ketamine operates. We know what it does. We know what it likes, if you like, as a spirit, to speak in a sort of shamanic register. So we built this ritual so you're contained, and then as you come back into your body, so you're released and you find yourself beginning to reoccupy your body in a new way. Wow. So that's in the book. I think that might actually be in Deep Magic, actually. I think in Magic Works, there's another story about ketamine and like some tantric stuff that goes on. Anyway, man, it's in there.
Man, I got to read that. So like, you wouldn't want to like introduce this to somebody who might have like done mushrooms once and maybe done the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram, right? And say, look,
oh man, this is you know, so one of the things about this sort of stuff is this was I don't know if it's cutting edge. I have no idea. But anyway, it's like this is the sort of stuff that firstly you have got antecedents for it. You've got examples of this. So when the early writing about the Druids happens in I think it's Tacitus's Germani, he writes about the Druids, and they were doing trance work. One of the few things we know about the Druids is they would wrap somebody in a bull's hide, right? So in a heavy animal hide, and they place a stone on their chest. And they would go into vision in that kind of a way. So this idea of, like when we're inside our mothers, being contained and being constrained and being wrapped, like you are in initiation rituals, very often it involves cords or binding, because it's a symbolic rebirth, yeah? But this practice was something that we developed like over time with a group of magicians, very experienced people working together, like really good practitioners, including people with like, medical backgrounds. So we were totally safe and knew what we were up to. Exploring the boundaries of this stuff. And like exploring any boundaries, there are risks. And of course, with any intelligent person takes steps to mitigate those risks where possible. But you got to push the envelope sometimes.
Yeah, I'll say that's an interesting book, man. I got to read that. That's intense. I mean, to think about being mummified, like that's going, also you're tapping into an ancient egregore there. You know what I mean? Like something that goes back to where magic probably began, I would say, because mummification was big back then, you know? So you had to have had some pretty profound experiences doing that, I would think.
Yeah, totally. And I think that one of the things about like a lot of the experiences or a lot of the kind of environments that we cultivate in magic, what we're actually doing is we are tapping into like ancient deep stuff, to the extent where if you go to a peyote circle and you sit with the beautiful lineage of the Native American church or a similar kind of process, you've sat around a fire. And you're sat around a fire pragmatically because it's the night time and you want to keep warm and blah. But you're also sat around the fire because for maybe at least 500,000 years, maybe longer than that. Our species, and in fact the species we were before we were our species, sat around the fire. So we're in this ancient, deep place, and that's where we take the medicine, and that's where we take the psychedelics. Or we go through these experiences of, ritual death and rebirth, like you do in, I don't know, even in the, although it's in a much more kind of, let's call it elaborate ritual kind of framework, but like the Master Mason initiation within Freemasonry, it's the same deal. It's like a death and resurrection. It's all the same trip, really, in many respects. It's basically death and rebirth. And so it's just like different ways of curating that space. You sit around the fire in the Native American church. You go in at sundown, and you exit the teepee in the morning time. There's a death and rebirth. They're going down into the darkness. In that instance, sitting around the fire like our ancient ancestors did, and like we do now, and then coming back out and being reborn in the morning.
Yeah, and that's and that is in like every initiation. And the Golden Dawn, I've went through one of those initiations. Yeah, there is a binding, there is a blindfoldness, there is a death and rebirth, a facing both sides of the light, fear and darkness and all that stuff, like facing yourself, waking up to it. It's all there, but I've never, the fact that you could put that together and did that tells me that you do know quite a bit about, I would never have thought of that. Because as magicians, you're always trying to think of stuff. Okay, what energies can I tap into? What would make this more powerful and more effective? And you went right down to the core of it, man. That's pretty cool.
What you have to do fundamentally, I think, is to listen to the spirit. And what that means is to pay attention to the medicine that you've got. So LSD has a certain kind of spirit, a certain quality to it. If we speak pharmacologically, it has a given duration and it has a given kind of profile in terms of the way it comes on. How quickly after ingestion does it happen? How does the experience ramp up? We can talk about almost like the wave of like the experience. So what you do is you look at the wave of the experience, or to speak shamanically, you look at the nature of the spirit and you say, well, what would this spirit like? And what can we bring to the party that will empower us and allow us to engage with this experience in a really good way? So we know, for example, that, going back to the example of peyote. So peyote is a long duration psychedelic. It will generally last maybe, 8-10 hours quite easily if you've taken a reasonable dosage of it. It's pro-social. So the rituals involving peyote are often rituals that happen within a group of people. So you listen to, like, what does the medicine like to have? Peyote is a psychedelic amphetamine, so the medicine likes to have rhythm and drumming and singing.
Yeah.
And just like in rave, just like with MDMA, which is the daughter chemical of mescaline in the peyote, there's that same rhythm. Dum 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 dum. This is the rhythm that substance likes. Yeah. This is the rhythm that responds well when we encounter it. It's not the only thing we can use, but it's one of the things that, if you like, the spirit grooves on.
That is so cool, man. Listen, we got to go into the top of the hour break here, but would you be willing to tell us, like, I know people are dying to hear this, but just a couple of experiences that you had while you were in these states that you can remember? I know everybody wants to hear the juicy stuff, right? But,
Oh, man, it's so difficult, isn't it? Because
it is difficult, though, isn't it? Yeah.
Because the experiences that make sense for me would maybe they'll not make sense for other people. I don't know. Let's see what unfolds.
We'll see. We'll try it anyways, right? All right. Look, I told you guys before the show started that when you try to explain a psychedelic experience, it doesn't always come across the way that you would like it to, because you can't quite explain it sometimes. But maybe we'll be able to try. You can get your questions in too at the chat room. We'll open the phone lines up. Just wait till I say they're open before you call in. 1-800-588-0335. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
777 Radio. And you can hear us 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Saturday night here on the Fringe FM.
Hey, this is No Way Jose, a Northern California Piscean stuck in the Arizona desert. I'm a Void Walker, and I got the shoes to prove it. So what do I do when my soul yearns to delve deep into the realm of the unknown? I aim my satellite straight into the night sky and catch a smooth ride on the KTLK-DB radio waves. I tune into Lighting the Void with Joe Root on the Fringe FM.
Joe, Lighting the Void is the best show on the planet. This is Barney, your friend from Facebook. Thank you and all the crew for all you do. Namaste, my friend.
This is Macon from the foothills of North Carolina, and I am a Void Walker.
G'day, Void Walkers. This is Lily from down under Australia. The world may be small, the enigma is greater. So let your curiosity take you for a journey with Joe Root.
Hey, this is Fee, coming in from Central Maryland, and I am a Void Walker.
This is Kevin Doherty, a beginner Void Walker. I'm from Vancouver, BC. I know a little about a lot, and as Leonard Skinner said, I guess the rest. I learned a lot from Mr. Root on the show, and heard it from the beginning. I knew right then he was going to be a new Art Bell. Thanks for all your shows, and keep it up.
Hey, this is Derek from Mass, a.k.a. the Night Stalker, and I'm a Void Walker.
This is Mark from Chicago, and I walk the void to ascertain what is consciousness.
My name is Jared Johnson, and I'm from Humboldt County, California. I do not know all of the answers to the questions about reality. I do not claim to know the ultimate truth about life. I seek that which has been made hidden as a part of a family of explorers of consciousness. I'm a Void Walker. Thanks, Joe Root.
This is Dave Cruz, host of Beyond the Strange Radio, and you're listening to KTLK, The Fringe FM.
Hi, I'm Alex Exum, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
My name is Jake. I'm from Billings, Montana, and I am a Void Walker.
Hey, Joe Root. Thanks for lighting the void. This is Janine in the bluegrass of Kentucky, and I am a Void Walker.
What's up, guys? This is Damien from San Marcos, Texas, and I'm a Void Walker. I listen to the show to keep myself aligned with the world.
Hi, this is Laura, aka Laura Lavender. I'm from Las Vegas, and I listen to Lighting the Void because it helps me understand some of the strangest experiences I've had. So thanks for all that you do and for always being there for us, Joe.
Tired of going out and having fun on Friday nights? Perfect. Because that's when our show, Shift Happens, airs live every Friday night at 7 p.m. Pacific. That's 9 p.m. Central, right here on the Fringe FM. You get there while you can status.
I'm getting older and noticing that my body just doesn't work as well as it used to. So I like to keep fit as possible by hitting the gym a few times a week. Recently, I started having a nagging bicep pain, and it got so bad I couldn't even lift the weights. When I was complaining about it to a friend, he told me about angioprim. He said chelation helps remove toxins, heavy metals, and cholesterol in veins and arteries that may cause blockages. You know, after just 1 week of taking angioprim, the pain was gone, and now I'm back in the gym full strength. Scientific research proves the active ingredient in angioprim has superior oral chelation action that helps promote cardiovascular health. So to learn more, go to angioprim.com. That's ANGIOPRIM.com, or talk to a trained consultant. Call Angioprim toll free at 945-882-7221. You'll feel better with more energy. That's 945-882-7221. Or go to the website
angioprim.com. Talk radio. Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7 with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
This is country music singer and Void Walker Jason Benoit.
law, and when I need my fix on the world of magic and the capabilities of the human consciousness, I listen to Joe Roop right here on Lighting the Void Radio.
This is Alex Exum of the Exum Experience and Live Talk, where we discuss current events, society, and culture. My shows are based in actuality, actual existence, contrasted with what was intended, expected, or believed. You can listen to me live Tuesdays at 7 p.m. only on KTLK, The Fringe FM.
To Lighting the Void, Julian Vayne, our guest tonight. If you want to go to the website, definitely need to check that out. The blog of Baphomet.com. And we're talking about his books as well as his experiences. His book, Getting Higher, the Manual of Psychedelic Ceremonies, as well as Magic Work, Stories of Occultism and Theory and Practice. And there is a definite authenticity I can tell to your experience and some of the stuff that you're sharing with us. Of course, before the break, Julian, everybody, I got to tell you, man, when it comes to radio, everybody wants to hear a story, right? And it's like, okay, well, I have to ask, what kind of experiences you've had with this. I mean, maybe try to explain to us. It doesn't have to be Joe Rogan style, right? Because everybody thinks that they're going to get the Joe Rogan style of explanation when it comes to these experiences. But I'm just curious as to some of the stuff. You can even just say some of the stuff that you've experienced. It doesn't have to just be one, if you would like.
Okay, man. Well, I think that there's you pointed at the difficulty of expressing some of this stuff, right. And that's why we have a word like ineffable, meaning we don't have words for it. But I mean, we can look at the practical kind of context and the outflow from these psychedelic experiences. So I've got a few little examples here. I'll give to start with just a personal one. So I remember on the second occasion taking ayahuasca. So this was an occasion in which it wasn't like a big Santa Daime ceremony, although I have attended those. This was like with a small group of magical practitioners working together. And just to give like a kind of a very sort of personal instance of how this self-transformation can take place. So I took a glass of ayahuasca, and it was incredibly strong. This was only the second time I'd ever taken it, but it was much more intense than the first time, which had been in a ritual in a brightly lit space while we were dancing. And I was doing my best to sing from a Portuguese hymn book. Without any Portuguese, I might add, on my part. But I took the ayahuasca and I had this remarkable vision. So the vision essentially was something which I think actually this is written down in Magic Works, where I found myself in a kind of South American bejeweled jungle in that way that you do, even though that wasn't the physical location. I was very far from South America. Yeah. And I came upon, or this beautiful woman appeared, this beautiful goddess, beautiful black woman with covered in what appeared to be perhaps parrot feathers or some kind of arrayed in this beautiful, engaging kind of erotic sort of kind of form. And then as I was watching this woman, what happened was she came towards me and she proceeded to defecate on me. She proceeded to, forgive my language, to shit on me. And what she was doing was she was letting go onto me all the harm and all the hurt and all the times I've ever been small-minded or bad or what I consider to be not living up to my best self, right? So all of the sin, to use a Christian vocabulary,
sure,
that was mine. And I felt this kind of coming upon me, coming through me, and I had to sit with that. I had to sit being covered in all of this shame. And then what happened was that this percolated through me, and I found, and this is incredibly hard to describe, that somehow a fire had been kindled inside my belly by this woman. She'd struck like a flint or something and put a spark into my belly. And the whole of me, I experienced my whole body like burning up, and like a phoenix, or like a new self arising from all of this dross, from all of this alchemical lead, from all of this like corrupted matter into this new sense of self. So that was just like a really personal moment of self-transformation. It was an opportunity for me to sit with the things that I find difficult and shameful and problematic in my life. Like, man, we've all got this stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And it was like really bringing that into a really visceral, physical sensation. Like it was like a thing that happened, you know, in the quote real world, but it was clearly in a visionary state. So there's a personal example. Let me give you an example of a piece of operative magic, a piece of magic using psychedelics to change things in the apparent intrasubjective external world. Okay. So a group of magicians in the early 90s that I'm associated with, they did a whole bunch of pieces of work in a big gay club in London. This was in the early 90s when the HIV pandemic was really raging through the community, killing lots and lots of people. It was incredibly difficult. And in this particular gay club, there were connections between the club promoters and some of the magicians involved. And so what they did was, in the club, before it opened, they drew magical signs on the floor. So like veves that you get in the voodoo tradition that you dance on to like raise the spirits of the Loa. So you make these magical patterns on the floor. Anyone who's ever been to a voodoo ritual or seen any of the images of this will see that the preparation before the dancing is to draw these patterns on the floor. So before the club opened, they drew these patterns on the floor. They'd spoken to the promoter, and at about 3 a.m. in the morning, they were going to play a piece of dance music which had a particular kind of sigil, an audio sigil encoded into it. And this was a healing servitor, healing spirit that the group that I work with, the Illuminates of Thanateros, work with, a spirit called Kawapor. And this healing servitor, this healing energy, this healing spirit ally was summoned into that place in order to be empowered by all of these people dancing, And the magicians gathered together. They all came together at 3 a.m. in the morning. There was like a signal. They all gathered together, dancing on these symbols. And at the beginning of the club, they'd already smudged people as they came through into the club. So there was like a sense that something slightly odd was going on for the participants, but it was nothing particularly kind of outrageous. They did a sequence of these pieces of ritual, and remarkably, they found that things happened on several levels. So one of the things was that a number of people who were attendees of the club found that they were finding that they were going into remission from the disease, or that the disease progress was actually slowing. And more broadly than that, the intention was the discovery and then the ease, the increased availability of medications to avert the pandemic and to help people who were suffering from the HIV infection. Now, again, like with the example I gave earlier, there's no way of rerunning the experiment where the magicians don't do this work. And I'm not suggesting that this was the only thing that was done. Many people were praying and making spells and setting intentions to deal with that pandemic, just in the same way that people are doing that now with the current situation that we're in. And so that was a piece of magical work designed to basically utilize the ecstatic dancing of hundreds and hundreds of people at 3 a.m. in the morning in a club in London, where everyone is, or many people are in a profoundly altered state of awareness, in order to channel that energy towards this healing spirit, Kawapor, in order to help the individuals who were there at that club, and also more broadly to address the issue of the HIV infection that was raging through those communities at the time. So that was an attempt at an operative piece of magic, using the psychedelic state, using this altered state of awareness on the part of all the participants in the club in order to effect a change in the world. And now we are in a situation where HIV, for many people, particularly those of us who are in kind of Euro-American culture, who have the benefit of having potentially, at least some of us, good healthcare and support and medicine and so on. HIV is now old news. Most people, even if they get infected, will survive very successfully with this infection, which in the 90s looked like it was going to decimate vast swathes of the population, whether they were gay, whether they were straight, whatever their story was, it was going to be like a massive problem. So there's like a personal example, and there's also a kind of a collective example. And I'll give a more recent example as well. So I did a piece of work a few months back now, where again I was interested in looking at the current pandemic, and I was interested in what was happening in the scenario here. And I did a piece of work using mushrooms. So a ritual, a piece of ceremony that involved going into the mushroom state. And while I was in the mushroom state, I encountered this really strange vision. The strange vision was of Darth Vader, right? So Darth Vader turns up, and we're in this huge space that looks kind of like an aircraft hangar and also kind of like a spacecraft. And there are lots of people on respirators in this place, in this brightly lit space. And they're all kind of laid out in the way some of them are prone, some of them are facing down, in the way that people who are being heavily respirated and ventilated because of the current coronavirus infection have to be treated when they're very, very ill. And the Darth Vader kind of character came over to me and said, it doesn't really matter about these people now. They're dead. What matters is that this is part of our journey. This is just part of the story that leads ultimately to our journey to the stars. Now, the interesting thing about the Darth Vader character was that Darth Vader, as you might know, is played by, I think, a British actor, but the guy had a black guy's voice, yeah? And the voice was of a person that I know, so a very, very serious practitioner, Baba Kalindi, who was involved in high-dose mushroom use. And I then had this vision, thought, oh, that's really strange. I wonder why this Darth Vader character was there. The next morning, I discovered that, unfortunately, Baba Kalindi has found it necessary to drop his body. And he, as far as I understand it, has died as a result of the COVID-19 infection. So this figure who, in my mind, was, if you like, it was almost like the spirit, whether it was the spirit of this guy, Kalindi, from Detroit, or whether or not it was kind of, some other kind of entity, who knows, but it had almost carved out from my mind, right? Here's Julian's brain. What's he got in there in terms of like impressive, powerful, like black voiced characters? Oh, he's got Darth Vader, right? Okay, well, I'll use that as my body to communicate with him in this vision. And what Kalindi was basically saying was that even though he needed to leave his body, even though the infection was ultimately going to take his life, this was part of the story of our human journey to the stars. And that was a lot of what Kalindi's kind of project was about using the mushrooms in order to liberate ourselves internally and externally so that we can be the kind of people that we want to be. And I didn't know, of course, that the guy had died until the next morning. And it's at that point that I started thinking, okay, so this is an example of a strange and mysterious effect. So there's an example of something that looks perhaps like a prophetic or a meeting with a friend who'd left their body. There's an example of something that's a collective piece of operative magic using psychedelics. And there's a very personal example of dealing with my own shit.
Which it tends to do quite a bit sometimes. Like, I wish that, honestly, the stuff was made more available to everybody. It does seem like there are places where they're trying to make it more available to the public, but it just seems like, we got to jump through hoops to get this kind of stuff. And I think it's, entheogens, like you were speaking earlier, people go through lots of stuff, man. You've got depression, you've got shame, guilt, heaviness, the incapability of just being happy or even optimistic. There's, I got to tell you, it's hard to be around anybody that's pessimistic all the time, that's not optimistic. And when we don't see like that's kind of like a disease that we can put upon others, I think, I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say is it should be on shelves everywhere. It should be like entheogens, right? Like you don't have to take Paxil or, whatever. This comes from the earth. It will reset your ass, right? So you can see, that being happy and positive and having a positive outlook on things could help you. I'm telling you, it'll do it. It just does,
I think that's a really good way of describing it, and changing your perspective is really what a lot of it's about. It's a bit like you imagine a friend of mine gave a really good example of this by saying, if you're a place where it snows and you wake up in the morning and you draw back the curtains and you realize it's snowed in the nighttime.
Yeah.
And before you start to think about the hell of trying to get to work and the car and all this kind of stuff, before you do that, there's hopefully a moment where you go, wow, the world is transformed. It looks really beautiful. It looks really amazing. It looks really different. Now, that sense of having the world transformed, looking potentially really beautiful and really different, even just an awareness that that is possible. So if you're depressed, even an awareness, if you take MDMA, that it is at least potentially possible to feel happy, that in and of itself is a great healing.
Yes.
Now, added to that, the fact that we now know, we knew this in ancient cultures, we know this from anecdotal evidence, we knew this from the research in the mid-20th century before the stuff was made very difficult to research, and we know it now definitely from contemporary research, much of which is been happening in North America. We know that these substances can really help people heal. And the way that they work, it would seem, is that they evoke a thing that that MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, who are very active, particularly in North America, they describe as the inner healing intelligence. And the easiest way of thinking about it is this: when you cut yourself, what happens is that the cut will start to heal. And you don't have to think about the healing. You might create the conditions that make the healing more likely. You might have good nutrition, good rest. You might need a plaster or a bandage or something to prevent infection. But the healing just happens. It's a natural process in your body. Now, in your mind, it would seem that we also have a capacity to heal. And the capacity can be reached by entering the psychedelic state. And the psychedelic state can be reached by all kinds of processes. It can be done through meditation, it can be done through breath work, and it can be done through substances curated and held in the right way. And basically what happens is that you enter the psychedelic experience and the mind has an ability to see things from a different perspective. So you look at your trauma. A great example of the work that's been done with veterans in the United States, looking at the trauma that they've experienced from, say, the Afghanistan conflict or Iraq and so on. It doesn't undo the memory, but it gives people a new way to accommodate and understand what went on, a way to sit, like I said with the example for me of the ayahuasca, with their shame, with their difficulty, with their problem, and to see it in a new way and to have it kind of transformed. And that's a natural process which is embedded in our minds, the inner healing intelligence, just in the same way that the ability of your body to make a clot, to heal the skin, is embedded within the physiology that we've got. The problem is that Euro-American culture has been disconnected from the psychedelic experience for a long time. There used to be a temple in ancient Greece called the Temple of Eleusis. So the Temple of Eleusis is a place. It's about something like 15 miles outside of ancient Athens, and people would go there for a psychedelic initiation. It would happen once a year in September. And this was a big thing, like 3,000 people would go at a time. And the people who would go would be anyone who could save the money up to do it. And it would include, slaves, it would include women, it would include people from all sorts of strata of society. And it would also include policymakers and lawgivers and architects and philosophers. Plato went there, Aristotle went there, emperors from the ancient world went there, and so on. And they went through a psychedelic initiation. And the psychedelic initiation brought them into a different relationship with their own death. Because one of the things that psychedelics do, going back to our conversation of initiation, is that they take you through this death and rebirth experience. And that ritual happened for at least 1,000 years, probably since the Bronze Age. This ritual was being practiced in ancient Europe. And it was at the heart, it was the most important ritual of the ancient classical world. The only two reasons you couldn't go there is, one, if you couldn't speak Greek, which you needed to do in order to know what was going on with the ritual. And the second reason you couldn't go there if you were a murderer. But everybody else was permitted to go to this ceremony, and everyone would go through it together. So the emperor might be next to you while you did this initiation ceremony, while you did this ritual death and rebirth. Now, we had that in our culture. That was the beating heart of European culture for thousands of years, up until about 400 AD. When this new series of religions arose, and particularly Christianity arose and linked itself closely to to what became the Holy Roman Empire, and the whole culture changed. Eleusis was closed down, And then from that point onward, people like us, these kind of Euro-American, people from Northwestern Europe, we had no access to the psychedelic state. It would occasionally appear within charismatic Christian movements and within other religious traditions as mysticism and so on. But by and large, it was pretty much forbidden. It was something that you didn't do. And like when I was a kid and looking around at shamanism, it seemed to be the kind of province only of people with darker skin than mine, who were in far distant lands or in ancient tribal cultures. It wasn't anything to do with me. And that's because my culture, our culture, had that ripped away from us about 1600 years ago. And our cultures have then gone crazy. Like my culture, in terms of Britain, we were the hub in the Victorian era of the greatest empire the world has ever known, by which I mean the most exploitative and violent empire that the world has ever known.
Yeah.
We predated on North America and on India, and we basically went crazy, and we went out looking for drugs that would get us up in the morning to go onto the machines and start working, things like tea and coffee and tobacco and sugar. And then we would also be fascinated with drugs that would allow us to shut up at night, so alcohol and opium. And the psychedelic experiences, the kinds of things like the peyote, things like the ayahuasca, they were completely there was nothing like that in our culture. And so without the access to the inner healing intelligence, without the access to this ability to encounter our own shadow and process it successfully, without the ability to sit with our own death and the experiences that inevitably come up for us as humans, knowing our mortality, we went crazy. We were mentally ill. And then we went off and we did a whole bunch of stuff on the planet, of which has finally led up to a situation where we produced 2 world wars, the possibility of nuclear Armageddon, the destruction of the biosphere, and the ice caps are now melting. And so to get those things back, whether we get it on the shelf, whether we get it through licensing, whether we get it through the kind of decriminalizing nature movements that are happening, and of course we recognize these things are powerful, potentially dangerous, and need to be used in a thoughtful and sensible way, just like your car does, just like your any of the objects that you have, the technologies that you have. We need to use these in a safe, sane, consensual, thoughtful way. But we have to have those technologies available to us, because those are the things that help us heal, and we need that right now.
Yeah, man, I totally agree with you. You could have said that any better. We need that more than anything right now. I know I do, because I might be the person that wakes up and sees the snow in the morning and be like, oh, Jesus Christ, it's going to be a rough day, instead of actually being able to be present in the moment and appreciate it for what it is, but I think, but I also wondered about this too. I also wondered, do we get to these states of what we call enlightenment, or what we call this state of awareness, to the point that where we kind of bury our heads in the sand about the problems in the world, or does it make us more aware of these type of things? I wonder sometimes, do we do it to the point where we don't even see what's happening right in front of our own face, to our own detriment sometimes? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, we're human beings. Yeah, we have to cut ourselves some slack. We're these kind of little hominids wandering around on the third rock from the sun in a tiny little part of the western spiral arm of the galaxy. We're just trying to do our best,
Yeah.
And I think that yes, of course, it's entirely possible to get caught up in these things in ways that are detrimental to ourselves and the people around us. But I think that fundamentally what a lot of magic is about, and a lot what the psychedelic experience is about, is it's about about finding connection at its best. So there's a piece of research done a couple of years back in the Imperial College in London, looking at people with treatment-resistant depression, and using psilocybin to help those people with their treatment-resistant depression. In fact, I was one of the people who was part of one of the early kind of trials, not because I have depression, but in the earlier studies, but to establish how tolerable this kind of treatment was going to be for people. But with the people with the depression, most of those people, when they would, you speak to them beforehand and say, well, why are you depressed? And they give a long list of how they're feeling and what's going on with their lives and so on. Interestingly, for all the people within the cohort of the study, with the vast majority of the people, one of the things that they noticed during or immediately after the psilocybin experience was that their depression was to do with their disconnection from aspects of themselves, their disconnection from their friends and their family, their disconnection from the natural world. So at its best, what the psychedelic experience is about a kind of a radical reconnection with things. It's not about disappearing into your own kind of puff of solipsistic self-identity or some kind of fantasy about being this all-powerful thing. It's about realizing the intimate interconnection of all things. One of the fundamental axioms of magic is as above, so below, as within, so without. All of this stuff is intimately connected. And when we find ourselves becoming these isolated, separated, atomized, fractured individuals, we become depressed. Yeah. A good example of this is if you look at something like addiction. People often say, the thing about drugs is the issue of addiction. Addiction is a function of being disconnected. There's a famous experiment done in, I think, the 1970s. I think it's a Canadian experiment called Rat Park. And anyone who's interested in understanding about drugs and addiction needs to know this experiment. The experiment, in essence, is really simple. If you put a rat in a box with a receptacle that will give it water and another one that will give it water that has either opium or cocaine laced into it, what the rat will do is it will keep pressing down the lever for the water that has the drug in it until it just kind of keels over, and then it wakes up, and then it will repeat it again. Now, you can take the same rat and you can put it into what the experimenters in the 70s called Rat Park. And Rat Park was an environment with loads of other rats. There were rats to hang out with, rats to have sex with, things to play with, places to go and run around. And you give the rats the same options. You give them water, and you give them water that's also got opium or cocaine in it. And you see what happens. And very, very interesting. Very interesting. The takeaway result, in essence, is this. If you put the rat into Rat Park, into a place where it has all these potential connections and interactions, it stops taking the opium. It stops taking the cocaine. So addiction is a function, not of the substance primarily. It's a function of disconnection. A rat is a social creature. You put me in a box on my own with no apparent hope of release, and you give me those two levers, one is water and one is water with opium in it. I know what I'd do, because I'm trapped in a box and I've got no hope. Whereas if you put me in an environment where I'm with like a bunch of other people, friends, family, things to do, connections, relationship, natural environment, that kind of stuff, that makes the desire to retreat into addiction, to deal with suffering, much reduced. And so I think that, that's
about
really
isolation, right? Right? Like,
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
The more you feel isolated, the easier it is to become addicted to things. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, which is why when we talk about like magic and we talk about all these practices, one of the things that's important in my experience is to have what the Buddhists call a sangha, to have a community of practice, whether that's online, whether that's friends that you hang out with, whatever it happens to be, because we need to be with other people. We're a social creature. And in order to stop ourselves disappearing into our own self-absorbed fantasies, what we need to do is we need to have practice which has at least some community with other people. I think that's a really, really important kind of aspect of what this is.
Yeah, totally.
And when I say other people, the other people could be like not human people. They might be animals, they might be plants, they might be like the natural world, wherever we want to do this. But it's about creating this set of relationships and this set of connections. That's what we're aspiring to do.
Well, listen, I'm going to open up the phone lines. If you guys want to call in, it's 1-800-588-0335, 1-800-588-0335. I want you guys to call in if you got any comments about this. Pacho, I see you, brother, my producer. He's all about this, so look, I have been desperately wanting to, for so long, get my hands on psychedelics again. But here's the thing. I can't do it alone. I don't want to do it alone. Does that make sense? It's not something that I want to do alone. What does that mean, do you think?
It means you're a social creature, my friend. And that's fine. The vast majority of psychedelic ceremonies and rituals, although people go off and do vision quests and they do their kind of solitary practice, if this process is something that's about connection, very often we want to do this with other people. And that's part of the reason I wrote Getting Hired, because I kind of figured that there are communities of people out there. There are youth who've managed to get hold of something from the dark web, and they've got like their friends and they've got this stuff, and they think, oh, what on earth do we do with this? You know, obviously you have to look at all the kind of, you know, the health and safety and the contraindications and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, a lot of these rituals, if you think of something like sometimes people refer to psychedelics as sacraments. A sacrament is what you have in a mass, and a mass generally is a collective ritual. It's a communion. Yeah, that's the point of it. It's this union between all these different individuals and between the divine and also with the substance, the material realm. It's really alchemical, because we're working with a physical substance to transform the profound imaginal lived experience of being a human. So it's like, you know, lead into gold kind of stuff. And for most of us, we want to do that with other people. We want to do that in community with others.
I don't even drink alone, brother. I don't, you know, I don't even drink alone. So how could I imagine, like, psychedelics to me is just not, I don't know, because it's so profound. Like, if I don't have somebody there to like bounce off of or relate to, you know, I have to, I think. I don't know. Yeah. No, I think that's definitely helpful. And I think, again, like we were saying about, I mentioned about ritual, like we naturally do this. So you take an example in the 1980s. Let's take that as our starting point. The late 1980s, when rave culture started happening throughout like Europe and North America and so on. That's what this was, man. This was like a psychedelic ritual. So MDMA is like a daughter chemical. It's a chemical that's from the same phenethylamine family as things like the peyote. So when the Native American church and the Huicholi people were meeting, the Huicholi people certainly for thousands of years using the peyote as their primary sacred medicine. When that new drug, that new alchemist's material came into our culture, what we did as Europeans is we responded to it by creating these great communal rituals. And very quickly, we assembled a whole variety of technologies and techniques which were about listening to the spirit of the medicine. So we realized that you needed like a chill out room where you could be quiet and you could talk and you could bring up all the feelings. And maybe there's people doing like massage, or there's like games and fun things happening in that space. Yeah. Face painting, whatever's going on. Playful, like reminding ourselves about the fundamental strategy for human learning, which is playing. That's how we learn most of our stuff as kids. You know, that's our fundamental strategy, being playful. And then I remember we used to do that, man. At rave parties, we had, we even had this like chair we would put people in, and, you know, you could hold your glow sticks and we'd spin you on the floor in the chair and stuff. So you could just like watch the lights. We had all kinds of stuff at these parties.
Yeah, totally. So you get a space like that, and then the flip side of that, or kind of working hand in glove with that, you've also got like the dance floor, where you have this repetitive, powerful, uplifting music that takes everyone collectively through this great experience.
Yeah.
Now that's a psychedelic ritual. Like however you cut it, that's a psychedelic ritual. You know, there's all the language, all the iconography. This was a modern opportunity to try and reimagine these things. And, you know, those things still go on. People still use those substances and those medicines. And it's interesting that given the fact that we do so often under the worst of all possible conditions, which is prohibition, which is the most dangerous of environments for people to use any substance. You know, look at prohibition in the United States, you know, in the early part of the 20th century, which led to people going blind with, like, you know, alcohol that was incorrectly manufactured, the rise of organized crime and so on. Like, even given the fact that we do this under very difficult circumstances, these are remarkably safe substances for the most part. Like, you know, paracetamol, daily kind of things that are prescribed for people, which are licensed and theoretically much more safely controlled, much more dangerous than something like MDMA in terms of, like, you know, people having kind of negative health consequences or indeed deaths arising from those things. So we did pretty well. We do pretty well, considering that we're doing it under really difficult circumstances, to find ways to get that communal sharing, to find that connection, to find those good ways of working with these medicines.
Yeah, like Mike is saying in the chat room too, there's a full moon coming soon, bonfire time, right? What's better? You could, I mean, I would even do that around a bonfire setting, you know, like if it's good, if the environment's good, if it is playful, if it's open, if it's friendly, free, and loving, it's the best place, right? But if anybody's ever done psychedelics in a bad place, you know what I'm talking about. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, I did acid once and with my buddies and went into a library, and the library was like Sheridan, Arkansas library. It's like a small redneck town library where everybody's half angry anyways, and then they want you to be quiet too. So you walk into the library, and it's such a trip because you can't get loud, you can't talk, you can't play, you can't do nothing, and you're full of acid, man. Imagine that. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not a good place to be in. You know, you want to get out as fast as possible. But I started laughing with my buddy Junior. We just kept laughing and laughing, and the librarian was like, "You guys got to get out of here." And the more, it's almost like we started coming to this realization of how ridiculous it was for everybody to have to shut up, you know? Like, and I was like, I can't do this, man. We got to get somewhere that's good, that feels good. And I never did that again. I was like, I'll never just take acid on a whim again unless I'm in a good environment or something, you know? So I knew it.
That's a really lovely example, and I can quite imagine that experience.
It's hard.
There's a bit in the beginning of Getting Higher, which is actually based on a conversation I had with my oldest son, and I remember like having this conversation with him and him saying, the thing, what's this thing with acid? You know, why is there like a problem with this? Why is this so heavily criminalized in our culture? And so we kind of talked about these issues for a little while. And I said, look, the thing about it is that the psychedelic state, because it makes you vulnerable, because it opens you up to whatever you're connecting with at the time, whether it happens to be the Arkansas Library or whether it happens to be like the natural world.
Yeah.
You're in this very, very sensitive state. And so you just have to be really thoughtful about like where you are and who you're with and what you're bringing to the party. You're setting your setting. And in Getting Higher, there's a bit where it says the difference is you can be with a group of people out in some beautiful location, good friends, and you look at the trees and you go, hey, look at all the little faces in the trees. And that's an experience of beauty and amazement and delight. Or you can be in a less good place personally with less supportive and helpful people. And you might go, oh, look at all the little faces in the trees. Same perception, different response to the perception. Yeah. Right. And the difference is the set and the setting. It's like what you bring to the party, where you are at in your own journey at that time, and also what that environment is that you put yourself into. And that's why things like raves, although they seem perhaps potentially really chaotic if you've never, not experienced one
right.
before, but actually, if you look at the broad way that these things are structured and the way the music works over the course of the evening and so on, there's a framework there that, however imperfectly, is designed to hold and support and push the experience in a good direction for most of the people who are going to go through that. You know, in the same way that in the latter part of the 20th century, in the 1960s, the rock music concert was invented. The music festival was invented, like Woodstock was invented. You know, these kind of environments were spaces in which to hold the LSD experience. That was part of what that thing was. This is our culture, who has been disconnected from the psychedelic experience for 1,600 years since the temple to Eleusis closed, trying to find our way, man, trying to find our way back to some healing, trying to find our way back to some connection, trying to find our way back to some good way of using these medicines and incorporating them in our experience. So, rock music festivals, Grateful Dead concerts, the rave and so on, they're examples of these attempts by the Western imagination to reclaim the psychedelic into our cultures for the benefit of ourselves and all the people around us.
Yeah, and you ever notice too, like what you're talking about as some of the rave parties I went to, if you were being I don't know, if you were just being a negative Nelly, or if you messed with the vibe of the place, people wouldn't just toss you out. They'd be like, just chill. They try to chill and get you into the vibe. And then eventually, like if you were going to be a problem, I'm telling you, they would find a peaceful way to kind of muzzle you out of that situation. It never turned into violence. Not like not like a nightclub or something where a fight breaks out. Or it was just this one vibe. And I remember like the biggest experience I had where I realized that this was a tribal type sacrament thing that was going on here was, I forget what DJ was playing, but I stood on the speaker box and I remember looking, and I was in the full throes of a trip, right? Like I was in the full throes of acid, and you know, it was one of those higher pitched house songs, right? So that was just, you know, forward to the floor, right? And I could see this just wave of people that looked like an ocean of just, that's how many people were there, right? And you could see the wave, like the music, either that or it was the trip. Either way, I saw it. Like the wave of music that was going through people that also felt like it was going through my chest at the same time too, though, you know?
And that's the thing, isn't it? It becomes, this is both personal and communal. So whether or not we're in those experiences with a medicine like LSD or with MDMA or whatever we're doing, or, you know, or even if we're just like fully present in the dancing, you know, you can go to a rave and be completely sober. And if you really let go into the vibe of the thing, you know, into this communal coming together, then you'll experience like definitely some of that, because we are who we are partly because of our relationship and our connection with other people. And so just like the rat in Rat Park, when we find ourselves in these isolated little boxes, like, you know, and being these kind of separated entities, we get sad, we get sick, we get, and that's really, really difficult for us. So to be able to go back into those kind of communal spaces where we have this deep sense of our shared humanity and our shared experience, and however the chemistry kind of plays into that, whether it's the endogenous chemistry, the stuff in our own bodies that happens if you do lots of dancing, or whether or not it's chemistry that we've used, that we've taken some kind of magical medicine, magical sacrament, what we experience is that sense of unity with others. And that's really important. I mean, look at a lot of the kind of, you know, the political, social stuff that we've got going on at the moment. What we lack as communities is really good ways to be able to come together in very, very simple terms. Like no one's asking you to do anything other than potentially either dance and enjoy the music or go and sit on the chair with your glow sticks. Like it's not a political issue, this guy, you know, this is like like you don't have to necessarily even take the drugs. Yeah. Just, you know, go into these experiences and go into this moment of shared humanity where we develop empathy for other people. We develop compassion for other people. We recognize that it doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat, a Republican or whatever, you're still another human on the planet. We're all trying to do our best. You know, one likes to think. So, having those experiences is essential for our psychic health, and the absence of those experiences in our culture, I think, is something that's very much led to a lot of the kind of difficulties and challenges that we find ourselves in now in the early part of the 21st century.
Man, I totally agree with you on that. I do. I think it gets silly to a point, because I was doing this like 35 questions thing the other night, and one of them was like, do you care about politics? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I do. I care about politics to the point to where how effective it is, but at the point that it gets stupid is when I stop, and it seems like it gets really quick to that point. Like I'm done with it, you know. And the older I get, I mean, look, I'm not gonna lie to you. When I was in my late 20s, my early 30s, I was like, oh, the president this, and I'd get into. But the older I get, I'm more like, yeah, kind of like what what is Adam Sandler says, like, well, what's in the fridge, right? Like I start not even worrying about it, you know, because nothing changes. Nothing really changes in that atmosphere, you know.
But you see, this is interesting, isn't it? Because if we go back to the example that I gave of Eleusis, you know, this ancient temple, and bear in mind, this temple was initiating 3,000 people every September. Right. Oh, wow, so 3,000 people, and that's a lot of people in the ancient world, every September for at least 1,000 years, including all the people who were what we would call people in positions of power. So emperors, the judiciary, so members of the armed forces, philosophers, writers. Now, it's very interesting. I always think this is an interesting little thought experiment. Let's take our leaders. So currently, I believe he's now locked in a bunker, but Donald Trump in the United States and Boris Johnson over here in Britain, here are these people, right? Now, whatever you think of these dudes, it's interesting to imagine them going through a psychedelic ritual where they come up close and personal with their own death, and also with their own connection with all these other people who could be like from anywhere in the ancient empire. These might be slaves, these might be, women who've traveled from the British Isles, or from further over east, over what we now call Turkey. And all these people meet together in this same psychedelic ritual, and they go through this experience together. Now, can we imagine our leaders, can we imagine Donald Trump, or can we imagine Boris Johnson going through such an experience, such an initiatory experience? And we kind of laugh and go, that's crazy talk. No, of course we can't. That's not the sort of thing our leaders do. Really? That's not the sort of thing our leaders do? So we don't ask of our leaders, the people who we are expected to vote for, the people who are expected to represent us, the people who are expected to make difficult, sometimes moment by moment, pragmatic and challenging decisions. We don't expect those people to have gone through the kind of initiatory self-discovery, those journeys. That's really weird. That's the weird thing. Yeah, it's not weird that we don't put our leaders through these experiences. It's weird. That's the peculiar thing that stands out for me about this, is that when we talk about kind of politics, we need to think about all kinds of things, including like what are the personal experiences and qualities of the people who we're kind of voting for, who are making these kind of decisions. And one of the interesting things about the Eleusinian mysteries is that because it gave people an opportunity to experience their own death, very often people who experience their own death on a psychedelic or a near-death experience, what actually happens is when they come out of those experiences, they are not actually more afraid of their own death. They are by and large more compassionate. They are by and large more empathic. They are by and large more understanding of like their own place in the world, without having an overbearing sense of their own self-importance or their own individual significance. They are more likely to be capable of good service to the communities that they work within. They are more likely to be able to have a sense of perspective about things, because they are able to sit with their own mortality. They're able to sit like I was with the ayahuasca, in terms of my own sin, my own difficulties, and be with those kind of things. Those are the qualities I would like to see in our leaders. Those are the qualities that we did have in this ancient time before our society went off and predated on the rest of the planet and destroyed vast amounts of indigenous cultures in one way or another, looking for drugs that would either get you up in the morning or drugs that would shut you up at night, as the industrial project started happening in the latter part of the last millennium. Like, that's the deal. So, people often say when they take MDMA, they kind of go, oh, wouldn't it be great if all the world leaders would just all take MDMA together and then maybe they could sort stuff out? And I often say, well, yeah, maybe that's worth a try, because have you seen how it's looking out there at the moment? Have you seen how the ice caps are melting? Have you seen how the species are being destroyed? Have you seen how, like, the whole of the west coast of the United States was on fire recently? Probably still is. Like, there's some stuff that needs addressing. And frankly, maybe it would be worthwhile locking them all in a rave and getting them to all take MDMA and jump about for a bit. I mean, it's worth a try, frankly.
Oh, it'd definitely be worth a try. I think it would. Yeah, at this point, definitely. So, yeah, man, like, we got to get out of here, but thanks for coming on the show. I think everybody that listens to this show, or has listened to this show at least a few hundred episodes, should probably get these books. I can't wait to get these books. And I guess if you would, I guess I could ask you this question as we get out of here, because these are some of the questions I was asking at the beginning of the show. That, do you believe that psychedelics and magic are both gateways to the mind?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, magic for me is the technology of the imagination. It's using the ability that the human beings have to deploy skill, to deploy imaginative process in order to engage with the mystery. And that's what psychedelics allow us to do as well. They allow us to use skill, to allow us to use specific types of molecules that have effects on our minds, curated in the right environment, the right set and setting, in order to explore this territory, to discover who we are, both individually and collectively. And that's the process, Joe. I mean, that's where I'm coming from on this. And I like to think that these things might really be important in terms of the healing that our individual people, communities, and species need at this critical time.
Man, well said. And thanks again for coming on the show. I want everybody to go to your website, the blog of Baphomet.com, and get some of your books. I hope we can have a discussion again in the future. It was really cool having you on the show, man. It really was.
Man, it's a complete honor. Thank you very much for inviting me. I really, really appreciate it. Lovely to speak with you.
You're very welcome. And guys, we'll put this up on the archives too, as well as the links. And I hope you enjoyed the broadcast tonight. We'll put all of the links in there. And tomorrow night, we're going to get into even a subject we haven't been into before either. How about a future life regression with time travel with Dr. Bruce Goldberg? We'll be on tomorrow night. Thank you guys. Pacho, Chronox, Steezy Stevie, all you guys and the patrons in the chat. We'll see you guys tomorrow night. Good night.